Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back or welcome for the first time. I'm Jared Johnson, the Jared J. Joining me once again is someone you may have seen before 86 or 22 times, Talmadge Roger Varnado III.
It's actually my first time here. So
Oh, well, welcome to the show, Talmadge.
I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you for stopping by. We're going to stay on the National Football League topic. Talk a little more about fantasy football this year. If you've been following the channel, you may have heard me say last year was my first year playing fantasy. I'm now in 15 leagues, and I'm commissioning a league of my own, which Talmadge and Chris Black are both in as well. So today we're going to talk about who our first-round targets for fantasy football are this year. Now, obviously, the league we're in is a snake draft. If it's an auction draft, you might land more than one of these guys. Snake draft, you get one pick per round, so you really got to be strategic. Build the right team. Know who you will take round per round. We're not going to analyze all 16 rounds. Maybe a topic for another day or for never.
We're not? Well, I don't need all this stuff.
Hey, I mean, we can keep the camera rolling. We could just do a mock draft just off of memory right now if we wanted to.
A snake draft with two people.
A snake draft, that would be it. Two-man league,
Our
snake
team
draft.
would be loaded.
They better both be loaded if we do that. But we're going to talk about who our top projections are, why we have them where they are. I'll go ahead and kick us off. I will say this. We haven't discussed in advance. I can almost guarantee our lists are going to be very similar.
Yeah.
I just don't know why they wouldn't be.
Right.
But we'll see as we go. Some of the order may be different, and some of my order, some of these guys I could easily flip-flop, and I'll touch on that a little bit as we go. But if I do get the number one overall pick, there is, and I'm going to combine catchphrases, there is indubitably just no question that none of the rest of y'all will have a chance of drafting Christian McCaffrey. I get that he's 28 years old. I get that he's had quite a bit of usage. Some people say he's had a lot of injuries. It was really only 2 years that he was injured. He's been healthy for the last year and a half.
If you could see what I see.
Do you see what I see? He's been healthy the last year and a half. He's arguably the deadliest weapon in the league. He went over 2,000 scrimmage yards last year, one of only 3 players in history to have 1,000 rushing, 1,000 receiving in the same year. Fun fact, do you know the other 2 guys?
No.
Roger Craig, Marshall Faulk.
Roger Craig I knew. Marshall Faulk
Yep.
I should have known,
One of
but
those years with the
I
Rams.
wouldn't have said it, though.
Yeah, so anyway, McCaffrey, until proven otherwise, I still think he's the best running back in the league. There's some other guys we'll get to that are closing in on that. But last year, in a full point per reception league, McCaffrey did average 24.5 fantasy points per game last season. He set out week 18 because of an ankle and because they clinched the playoffs, so they didn't need to
He'll
use
be
him.
doing the same thing this year.
But if you can draft a guy that gets you 24.5 points a game and he misses a game or 2 because they're preserved him for the playoffs, that's a risk I am willing to take. So he's my number one for sure.
Well, plus, that late in the year, a lot of leagues are over anyway, so it's not
That's
gonna,
the truth.
It's not going to hurt you.
Unless you're fighting to get into the playoffs yourself, it's probably not going to matter. And that's why you draft really good from rounds 2 through 16 anyway, because McCaffrey might sit out, or anybody you pick early may sit out. So Talmadge, who's your number one?
I thought we were going 10-1, so we're going.
I mean, you know,
10.
I've already started at
But
the top,
we'll do that then. I have nothing to add. Mine's exactly the same. I mean, as
Okay.
you know it would be. He's the ultimate weapon. He gives you receiving yards. He gives you rushing yards.
Touchdowns. He had like 20 touchdowns last year.
And for the most part, the last couple of years, he's proven to be healthy, which was always a concern. So he's clearly the number one pick in any draft. Period.
Yeah. Some of the leagues I've been in this year, he has not gone over one. I've got him on 2 of my teams so far. I've been
Well, I would
fortunate
expect
enough.
you to win both of those leagues.
Maybe. All right, my number 2, I do have wide receiver for the Miami Dolphins, Tyreek Hill. He's 30 years old. A lot of people might be thinking, okay, he's 30, he's got to start declining. Until proven otherwise, I'm going to take a risk on him. He's had over 1,700 yards receiving each of the past 2 seasons. Last year, and I guess I can stop saying this at a certain point. I'm talking about full PPR leagues.
Okay.
He averaged 23.5 fantasy points per game last year. This is a guy that can get you 40 or more on a given week. He can explode and go off. I get that he's 30, but until proven otherwise, he's as good as any receiver in the league. He had a goal of hitting 2,000 receiving yards last year. If not for a late season injury, he might actually would have done that. Now, in a dynasty format, I did not draft him in my dynasty, so we're talking just a regular league. Tyreek's my number 2. Talmadge, who's your number 2?
Tyreek Hill's my number 2 as
Oh,
well.
okay.
My only concern with him as he's getting a little older, he's not shown any signs of slowing down, but my point is, especially at receiver, soft tissue injuries when you start to get older. I think he had one last year against the
I think
Titans.
that's where he said, yeah.
And so
Did slow him down some.
that may sideline him from time to time, but assuming that doesn't come into play, he's number 2 easily.
Yeah, I think so too. And in case you hadn't noticed, Talmadge, somebody else that's in the league with us this year is now taking notes with a pen and paper. So, you know, not like you can't just go back and watch the footage. He's getting a handwritten list here.
He normally falls asleep during these.
Right,
so
we're keeping
this
his
must be-
interest
this
at
must be
least.
good.
This must be a good sign. My number 3, and this guy could easily be my number 2. I could almost flip a quarter, and I'll say why I've got him in the order that I do. My number 3 is CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. Last year, he had over 1,700 yards. He led the league. He had like 135 targets, over 100 catches. I think it was 1,749 yards, somewhere in that range. 23.7 fantasy points per game last year, so slightly more productivity than Tyreek. CD stayed healthy all year. I think that's the biggest reason for the differential. I could almost take CD over Tyreek, and I know this is not a dynasty, but I will say it. In a dynasty,
You would.
no question I'd take CD ahead of Tyreek. The only reason I would probably take Tyreek ahead of CD Lamb, nothing much has changed about Miami's offense since last year. They've got the same weapons in place. We know what kind of usage he's going to get. CD will get a ton of usage, but the Cowboys still don't have a really good number 2 receiver. I get Brandon Cooks has had a pretty good career. His age is showing. Jake Ferguson could and should emerge. He's probably their second best receiver. They don't have much of a running game. There's not really anything to keep defenses from every single week just loading up and saying, how do we slow CeeDee Lamb down? Let's double team him every time. Let's take him out of the offense. For that reason, there might be some struggle. He's an elite enough talent. If you can get him in the first round, it's still worth it. But that's why I have Tyreek slightly ahead. They were splitting hairs, but you have to when they're that close.
Right.
So, Talmadge, who's your number 3?
CeeDee Lamb. For all the reasons you gave, also I have some of the same concerns you have, and I'll add another one, the holdout. Well, I shouldn't call it a holdout, but
The contract
the
negotiation
contract
holdout,
negotiation.
yeah.
Here's the thing on that. With his management and with his personality, usually I don't panic over these kind of things.
Right.
Players play. I could see him being the one that says, I'll play the last 5 games of the year. He's not going to sit up front, but you've got to play the last 5 or 6 games of every season to be vested, to get credit for that year, as far as pensions and things like that. So I could see him holding out that long if they don't get this resolved, and I just don't understand why they haven't resolved it.
Conversation for another day, but that irritates me too.
Yeah.
Why are you not paying a man that's arguably the best
That you're
offensive-
gonna end. Here's the thing: you're gonna end up paying him because the way the salary cap is designed, you know the salary range he's gonna get.
Right.
So we're literally arguing over the language of the contract, or $35 $35 million versus $33 million.
Right.
It's not worth it.
Who cares when he's this good?
And also, even if he comes in earlier than that, if he misses camp, he doesn't have the timing. There's more chance for injury. This rarely works
Yeah.
out well. But assuming he's on the field when he's supposed to be, and I guess at this point that's what we have to do.
Right.
He's my number 3.
Okay, and I didn't bring that up, but I 100% concur. And why don't you pay a guy that, and I'm going to use the term arguably because there's some guys, he's arguably as good as any offensive player in the league.
Well,
why don't you just pay him what you know you're going to
And especially for the reasons you just named. They don't have a number 2. You can Brandon Cooks me to death, but Brandon Cooks been on 12 teams. So
Right.
that tells you, as good as he is.
That
he
tells
ain't
you how
got-
good what
come
he's
on
worth
now.
at this point. Yeah. So my goodness, congratulations, Jake Ferguson. Be ready for some big
Yeah, that's
targets.
right.
Draft him when you can, and I've already got him in at least a couple of leagues. Anyway,
You have everybody in a couple of leagues. When you're in 15 leagues.
when you got 15 teams, there's very very few players that I can't say I don't have on a roster somewhere. I've got Derrick Henry on at least 2. James Conner's on about 5. All right, let's go.
He's still going.
And still going. All right, my number 4 is a guy that last year I think was kind of the consensus number 1 in a lot of leagues. He's dropped a little because of some questions with the quarterback, and I get that. But number 4, I've got Justin Jefferson. Last year he missed 7 games with a hamstring injury. Still averaged 20.2 fantasy points per game. Even when he came back, and y'all know if you've been watching the channel or if you don't, you're going to find it now. I am a huge Kirk Cousins fan. One of my favorite players. I think he's a great quarterback. Even when Jefferson came back last year and was playing with Nick Mullins and Jarrett Stidham at the end of the year, Jefferson was still putting up 100-yard games.
And didn't Dobbs get a couple of games with them too?
Josh Dobbs. I don't know if Jefferson. I think Dobbs started, but I think Jefferson might have still been hurt when Dobbs was starting.
Gotcha.
I don't know that they had overlap. It may have been a game.
No, I got you. You're probably right. I didn't think of that.
Hawkinson was still doing very good with Joshua Dobbs, and Jordan Addison kind of stepped it up because he needed to. Justin Jefferson, in my opinion, even with the rookie quarterback, he's so stinking good. I don't think it's going to hurt him.
Darnold's not a rookie.
Well, okay, and Sam Darnold might start over J.D. McCarthy. Whichever one of those guys it is, I think it might hurt Jordan Addison more because he's the number 2 receiver. He's not as elite. He's still good.
And he's got some personal issues going on right now, so that could hurt him too.
That could always, yeah. Jefferson, I think, is still an elite receiver. I think he's still good enough. If he's on the board at number 4, I'm taking him. I don't see a reason not to. Talmadge, who is your number 4?
I have a small surprise here, not a big one.
Okay.
But I'm going with Breece Hall, number 4.
Okay.
Time to get a running back on the board. He can catch. He can run. I think with having a legitimate quarterback, that's going to open up things for him as well.
Surely have to, yeah.
Definitely in a dynasty league.
Yeah.
But even if not, he's a top 10 pick. I'm admitting it's probably a little higher than most. There's another running back that most people probably would have higher than him.
Yeah, but it's not too crazy.
But I'm sticking to my guns here.
Yeah, well, Breece, and I traded for him last year in the league I was in, and I was very happy with what he gave me by the end of the year. He's got speed. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He just needs a better situation, and if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, that's what he'll have. Yeah. Especially in a dynasty, if you can get him, my goodness, yes, invest in him. He's only going into his 3rd year. He's going to be an elite running back, I think, for a long time. So, not a bad pick there at all. All right, at number 5, I have my second running back, a guy that y'all might know I'm a big fan of, Bijan Robinson for the Atlanta Falcons. Last year as a rookie, he averaged 14.5 fantasy points per game. I will say my expectation for a first-round pick is a guy that can average around 20, at least 17 to 20. I think you need to get a guy that you can depend on that's going to get you in that range. Now, Bijan averaged 14.5 last year, which is not bad. He had over 1,400 yards from scrimmage, rushing and receiving combined. New head coach this year. He's got a 2nd year of experience. Much better quarterback coming in. I think it's going to open things up for him. I think Bijan, along with the guy you just named, could challenge McCaffrey for being the number 1 running back in the league this year. I don't think it's crazy to see that Bijan could average 20 or close to it this year. He's got very good balance, good vision. He can catch the ball. He's got good speed and burst. There's not a lot of weakness, if any, to his game if he's utilized better. Yeah. I just think he's a phenomenal player. He not only is he on my dynasty, he was my number 1. He was my first round pick in the dynasty league that I am in this year.
That makes total sense.
That's how much confidence I have in this guy. So if he's on the board at number 5, y'all are not going to get him. I will be drafting Bijan there.
You're not wrong at all.
All right, Talmadge, who you have as your number 5?
Ja'Marr Chase.
Okay.
Obviously, the talent speaks for itself. The production speaks for itself. And hopefully he's going to have a healthy quarterback. Not that the backup quarterback did poorly last year, but
Jake Browning pretty good for a backup, but he's not Joe Burrow.
Yeah, you can't Burrow. So assuming
LSU fan, he's not Joe Burrow, right?
He's not Joe Burrow.
But assuming Burrow is there for a full season, Ja'Marr Chase, I have nothing else to add. I mean, he's that good. He's that good.
Okay. Well, At my number 6, I also have Jamar R. Pursue diligently. Everything Talmadge said, I'll throw in. He averaged 16.4 fantasy points per game last year. A little less than what I said I'm really looking for, but the elite level talent, he's in the range with Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, and
Yes,
Tyreek.
yes,
They're, in my
yes,
opinion,
yes.
those 4 guys, and another one I'll mention very soon.
Me
You
too.
probably will too. They're the top tier receivers. If Jamar R. and Burrow both stay healthy, there's almost no limit to what they can do. And that was evidenced in the game they had last year against Arizona Cardinals, where Jamar R. had, this may be a little bit off, but if I'm not mistaken, he had like 15 receptions, 191 yards, 3 touchdowns, put up like 51 fantasy points. He can go off like that. And he really is that good. When he and Burrow are both healthy, he is about as deadly as any receiver.
Well,
so.
and even though they play different positions, so I'm not sure how this would impact him. But keep in mind, Tyler Boyd's not in Cincinnati anymore either.
That's true.
Now, granted, he's a slot guy where Chase is on the outside, but still, that's one less dependable guy to go to. So
Right.
he might get more targets because of it.
And
T.
that's-
Higgins in the last year of his deal, who knows how that's going to work out. He signed on the franchise tag, yeah, which most players don't like
They
doing
don't like
that.
yeah.
So how do you know how? So it might be he gets even more opportunity. Who knows?
And the more opportunities this guy gets, the deadlier he can be. He's put, every year that he's been in the league, he's put up big numbers. So there's just no reason not to take him. I could even see somebody taking him as high as number 3 or 4 if you wanted to do that. I wouldn't argue it too much. But yeah, got him as my number 6. Talmadge, I believe we're on your number 6 now.
Be John Robinson.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we just had those kind of
Flip-flop,
reverse
yeah.
order there. But
The only fear I have, and it's not his fault, is I don't know who their offensive coordinator is. And they've got a defensive-minded head coach. So,
I heard the guy's name, but it's not somebody I'm familiar with, so I don't know.
Well, hopefully they know how to utilize him, which I think they will. And you're exactly right about the quarterback. I mean, it's like night and day. I'm not quite as high on Cousins as you, but I'm not too far behind. I've always thought he's gotten a bad rap. Especially when people say, well, he can't win the big one. Well, if you're playing in this era of football, unless you're Tom Brady or unless you're Pat Mahomes, you
now.
probably didn't win the big one either.
Yeah, there's a lot of great quarterbacks you can say that
I mean,
about.
yeah, and so Lamar hadn't won the big one.
Josh
Allen
Allen
hadn't won the big one, but they're great quarterbacks.
Right,
though.
they're
So,
elite quarterbacks, but yeah.
And I'm not saying that Cousins is that good, but I'm making
He's
the
not
argument
quite
that
there, but
that
he's up there, I think.
he's an upgrade, and you can win games with him, and he knows what he's doing out there. He's going to put up points, put up numbers, and this is fantasy football, not real football.
Right.
And when you're looking for who can put up numbers,
That's
he can
what
do
you're
that.
looking for. I believe, and don't quote me on this, I think the Falcons' new offensive coordinator is a guy named Zach Robinson, who was the offensive coordinator for the Rams.
Okay.
So if you look at their offense and
Okay.
how it's been looking,
Okay.
that may give you some idea
Okay.
of what he plans to do with some of the weapons.
And again, that's a minor concern because you can't hold real talent down. I don't care what the
Bijan's
scheme
so
is.
good,
Yeah.
you can't really.
But that
yeah.
is something I thought of. But yeah.
Yeah, there's so many factors, especially when you're choosing your first round guy. There's a lot of these little factors that need to be taken into account. At my number 7, I have a wide receiver that I would say also belongs in that top tier.
Yes.
From the Detroit Lions, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Last year, he really burst on. We knew he was good. He had over 1,500 yards receiving last year, averaged 20.7 fantasy points per game. A lot of argument could be made for him being higher than number 7. I could see him going as high as number 4. If you just weren't sure about Justin Jefferson's quarterback situation or Jamar R's quarterback, I could see someone maybe
All of
taking
these
him that
receivers
high.
we've mentioned so far could be 3 or 4.
Every
last one.
Yeah, I concur. You could switch this order around a lot, but Amon-Ra, the thing I'll say, hardly anything's changed about the offense he's in. You still have Jared Goff. You still have Sam Laporta. Oh, are you worried that Laporta's going to take targets? Big deal. They were both there last year.
And they did,
You still
yeah.
got David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. There's nothing whatsoever outside of some kind of horrendous injury that's going to keep St. Brown from having the same productivity, the same opportunity, and putting up the same numbers he did last year, if not bigger ones.
He might be the biggest sure thing of the receivers we're talking about. And not because he's more talented, but the other ones have other variables.
That's
that
what I
are
was going to
impact-
say.
yeah.
He's in such a situation, don't know for sure, but at the end of the season, he may put up bigger numbers than Tyreek or CD. I won't be
I could see
shocked.
it.
I'm not going to say he will,
I could see it.
but the talent is there.
Yeah.
All right, who you have as your number 7, Talmadge?
The name you just
Is it
mentioned.
Amon?
Sorry.
This is almost funny. I promise we didn't talk about this ahead of time.
there-
I pitched him this topic, and then here we go.
Yeah, there's not a lot more than I can add. I'm just glad he's getting the props that he deserves because
Oh, yeah.
he wasn't a well-known name coming out of school for the casual fan.
He went to USC. He was their number 1 receiver. People,
But that program hasn't been.
they kind of dropped out.
What
No, I
it's
don't
been.
disagree. Yeah.
And I'm just glad last year he got the recognition he deserved. It's going to continue, and like we just said, I mean, he could easily be 3 or 4 on this list.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't argue it. I would just say,
I wouldn't
okay, we
either.
flipped a coin, and that's where he landed. He's that good. He's that good.
You might not believe this, but I think I've got him on 2 of my leagues as well.
I do believe it.
All right, at number 8, I've got another receiver that's maybe just barely outside that
Right.
top
I would
tier, but
agree.
still very
But
close.
he's right there.
He's right
Yeah.
there. Former Tennessee Titan,
I
now
cry
with the
every
Philadelphia
time.
Eagles.
Tears in my eye.
A.J. Brown. Last year, he averaged 17 fantasy points per game.
He's really writing this?
I told you, he's got a pen and paper. He's over. Jared wants A.J. Brown. How do I strategize?
This is serious.
Yeah, y'all don't get to see everything that we see, but yeah, Chris is over there. He's charting this out. These guys both have him. Jared's gonna take Bijan here. Talmadge is gonna wait there, and we don't know the draft order yet either. We won't know until an hour
Well,
before the draft. So.
Little does he know
I'm
we.
just curious of how close you are to the top 10. That's all I'm doing. And you're not going to draft all these players.
Unfortunately, it's not possible. I'd love to have this
Well,
whole
My
roster.
question
But
is just how close to the top 10? When we get done with our first round and we're going to the second round, how close are you guys?
oh, how many of these guys are going to spill into the second round? Is that
No,
what
no,
you're
no.
saying?
How many are going to go in the first round? How many of every one of these guys we list when we finish
It'll be
the first
close.
round?
It'll be close.
I don't think too
How
many of
close
these.
are you? That's
Yeah.
all I'm looking for.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, little does he know this is our fake list and we're shooting the real episode when he leaves. But you just keep writing over there.
Considering it's not
I was gonna say we got another.
I was hoping you
arrangement.
wouldn't say that, but the joke still sounded funny,
Yeah.
so I shot it out there anyway.
One thing I will say about AJ Brown, his productivity did tail off towards the end of last year. The whole Eagles offense is like the wheels came off of the wagon
Yeah, I
there.
don't- yeah,
So
there-
I
there
can't
was
fault
something
him
else
too
going
much.
on there.
He had a streak of 6 consecutive games of 125 yards or more. He's an elite receiver, like I said, maybe barely below those other guys, but you could argue he's kind of right there with them. He's going to give you, he's had over 1,000 yards all but 1 year of his career. He's up there. He's had over 1,400 yards each of the past 2 years. He's still got Jalen Hurts. Not much about his situation's changed. They did add Saquon Barkley. That shouldn't take any of Brown's targets away. Especially if I have the number 8 pick and he's still available, I'm going to be ecstatic
I'm pretty happy.
to get A.J. Brown at that point. So, Talmadge, who do you have as your number 8? Let me guess. Is it A.J. Brown?
It's AJ Brown. Every time I see the name, it brings tears to my eyes.
You have to
but-
like catch your breath like
Yeah.
Fred Sanford.
Yeah.
Oh, the worst one ever had.
Although I don't know who I'm going to join because I
Right.
have no
Elizabeth.
But no, yeah, it's AJ Brown, and like you say, he might be a tick below the others, but I mean, we're truly splitting
It's-
hairs
yeah.
here. As far as being able to break tackles and size and strength, he's probably the
Big,
best
physical.
on this list.
Yeah, I don't think there's any problem about that.
The red zone target probably is a little higher for him. Not
6'1",
much,
226.
but yeah.
I mean, he's
And like you said too, he's done this in an offense that has more weapons, but he still stood
and he's
out.
still there.
And even his
standout,
last
yeah.
year with Tennessee, people don't think of Tennessee with weapons, but that year they did. They had
Well,
Corey
yeah,
Davis,
'cause
they had Derrick Henry. they had-
Was that the year Henry had 2,000 yards?
No, it wasn't that. It was the year after.
Okay.
But in that same.
It was in that
yeah.
same range, yeah.
And so actually he did have 2,000 that year.
Was that the same year? Okay, I
Corey
was
Davis,
thinking maybe.
Yeah, because Corey Davis had like 985 yards, so just under 1,000.
Right.
AJ Brown was over 1,000, and Derrick Henry had 2,000. So people don't think he did it in Tennessee, but he did.
No, he did.
And
yeah.
then in Philadelphia, he's proven it again. They have other weapons, but he still stands out amongst the other
Let's
weapons.
put it this way: Devonta Smith was a Heisman winner. over 1,800 yards receiving. He's had 1,000 yards each of his first 2 years. He's still not the best
Yeah.
receiver on his own team because A.J. Brown's so good. Devonta Smith could be the number one receiver on a lot of teams in the league.
A lot of them.
He's number 2 because A.J. Brown's so stinking good. That tells you how good A.J. Brown really is.
No, so our lists are remarkably the same. and even our next choices, we just had them flip-flop. But I'll let you go ahead.
Okay. Well, at my number 9, I have a guy that Talmadge already mentioned. Breece Hall, running back for the New York Jets. Last year, he got off to a slow start. Aaron Rodgers was injured. Also, Breece had an ACL injury
Yes.
near the end of his rookie year that did impact him going into the beginning of his second year. Like I said, I was able to execute a trade to get him on my team near the end of the year last year. And man, was I happy. He put up 40 fantasy points against the Commanders in one of the final games last year, where he had over 90 rushing and over 90 receiving in the same game. He averaged 17.1 fantasy points per game for the season last year. Slightly better offensive line. He was running fully healthy at the end of last year. If Rodgers stays fully healthy all year, this guy could be unleashed and be right in that range with McCaffrey, with B. John Robinson, maybe one or two other guys we could put kind of in that range. If we're talking elite level running backs, you don't have a conversation without Breece Hall being in it. All right, Talmadge, who you have now as your number 9?
I have my number 9, whom you had at number 4. So we flipped it. We inversed it.
Okay, we inverted that. That is interesting.
yeah.
Not only if our list been almost identical, we inverted the 9 and the 4, not the 5 and the 6. That's pretty.
Well, we did that one also.
The 18 or the 12. Well, we did invert the 5 and the 6 and the 9 and the 4. So in case you forgot my number 4,
Justin Jefferson. And like you've kind of already mentioned as a side note in a couple of the explanations here, he probably should be higher based on talent and production, but the quarterback does scare
that
me
concerns
a
you enough to
little
put him
bit.
down at number
So,
9.
but after I look at, if you were to talk to me and we were having a true argument, like not an argument to see who's right, but a knockdown drag
Just
out
a really
argument,
going into it.
You could quickly convince me, not because I think you could beat me up, but because you'd be right, that he should be higher on the list. You could easily win that argument because I'm looking at the list and I'm like, I probably should have him higher, but that quarterback situation
That concerns
scares
a
me.
lot of people, and I kind of understand, especially when so many of these receivers are close talent wise.
Right.
Like that argument you just made could put him on Ross St. Brown higher because he's got a more stable situation.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't disagree entirely with that. Jefferson, to me, the talent is so good, I'd still risk taking him at number 4.
Yeah.
But I get why you might.
If
not
I had to
would.
remake the list, I'd probably make the change. That's probably a bit low for him, but not much. Because like I say, I would drop him maybe in that 6-7 range. So maybe it's a tad
All these
too
guys
low,
are elite.
but it's so close that it is what it is at this point.
We've got only 10 guys from the whole league that we're naming as first rounders. There's a reason that
Yeah.
they're all this good.
Yeah.
All right, now my number 10, and I will admit, I've got him here for a reason. There's a couple of other guys. I'm going to cheat a little bit, so I'm going to name 12. I'll say a couple of other guys that I could maybe put instead of this guy. But as of now, at my number 10, I do have second-year Los Angeles Rams wide receiver Puking Nicotine. No one expected him to explode last year.
Not at all.
All he did was have 1,400 yards receiving, over 100 receptions. He averaged 17.6 fantasy points per game last season. The other guys I could maybe replace him with are Jonathan Taylor and Jahmyr Gibbs. I think those guys are elite as well. And if Taylor stays healthy, let's not forget, was it 2 or 3 years ago he had 1,800 yards rushing? He could get back to that level, especially if Anthony Richardson
I think it was
is
3.
healthy all year. Was it 3 years ago
Yeah.
now? That sounds about right. But that Colts offense has plenty of weapons. But I do have Puking at number 10. When Cooper Kupp was out last year, before he came back from injury, Puking averaged 23 points per game. He was destroying people. When Kupp came back, it did cut into his productivity a little, but he still ended up averaging 17.6. So if I can get him with my number 10 pick and he still averages 17.6, I'm going to be willing to live with that. Because also in a snake draft, when you get the number 10 in the first round, you get the number 1 in the second round.
Right.
So if I land there, I could easily take Puka and Jahmyr Gibbs or Puka and Jonathan Taylor. And guess what? I'm feeling pretty good about the start that I'm off to. So that's my number 10, along with 2 guys that I could maybe flip-flop in place of him. Talmadge, who do you have as your number 10?
Here's the only name that we have different, the only slot that we have different. I considered Jonathan Taylor like you did. I considered Gibbs like you did. Did not choose neither. I chose another receiver. Believe it or not, it was Garrett Wilson.
Oh, okay.
And the reason why I chose him, the talent's there. He's as good as
talent
all
is
these
there.
guys on this page or that we've talked about. He just has never had the quarterback. Assuming Rodgers is healthy and assuming Hall is also productive,
Yeah.
you've still got to guard that receiver on the edge
Mm-hmm.
that's big, fast, strong, and you know Rodgers will put the ball up there for him to go get.
Well, you look at every receiver that Rodgers had in Green Bay and the productive. When his number one receiver, whoever his number one receiver is, they were an elite receiver.
And besides Adams, this guy is probably the most physically talented receiver of all the other ones
You
mentioned.
could make that case.
And so I'm taking a bit of a flyer here. I think most leagues I've seen him projected around 15, 14, 16 in that
The leagues
range.
I've drafted in, he's going by the mid to late second round.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a reach, but I'm taking a flyer here just because of who the quarterback is. And
Yeah.
I'd like to see what he could finally do with a real quarterback.
Well, let's put it this way. He's had over 1,000 yards receiving each of his first two seasons. Keep in mind, Garrett Wilson's still only going his third year.
Yeah.
He's had some terrible quarterback play. I took him in the third round last year. He's a guy I'm not willing to draft this year. While I agree with everything you're saying, I'm not going to draft him as high as you would have to draft him because if Rodgers does get hurt again, I'm not spending my second or third round pick like I did last year.
Yeah, it's definitely a
But
risk.
anybody
Yeah.
could get hurt.
Yeah.
Anybody could get hurt, so I can't go with that. If you're betting on talent, I don't disagree with you because he's had over 1,000 yards each of his past years, and my goodness, Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, Tim Boyle.
And to say below average quarterback, that's being kind.
Oh, that's being
It's
kind.
worse than below average. So that again, bit of
Yeah.
a flyer. Might be wrong here,
But with the ceiling that he has,
Yeah.
if Rodgers is healthy, it's worth the risk. And especially you're not saying you're taking him over Christian McCaffrey. You're saying at the number
Yeah,
10.
yeah,
So again, snake draft, you get the 10 and the 1. You could take him and Jahmyr Gibbs.
come back with Gibbs,
And you
exactly,
feel pretty good
exactly,
about where
exactly.
you're starting, right?
Exactly.
So, okay. Well, interestingly enough, our lists were nearly identical or very, very close anyway. We'll have to see where I can feel pretty comfortable that we will both end up with one each of these guys in the league that we're in.
as long as he doesn't win.
Well, Chris can still end up with several of these guys because we everybody gets one pick per round in the snake draft. So
Won't beat Drake London. Or Greg Davis.
Gabe Davis,
Gabe Davis, whatever his
yeah.
name is.
You notice that we didn't mention Gabe Davis. Now Drake London by the second round, I might be.
I got all kind of information on Gabe Davis if y'all want
We'll
it.
see. We'll see about that. But thank you all so much for joining and hope this was fun for those of you that play fantasy football and even those of you that don't. If you did like the video, please show that by clicking the like button. And if you've not already done so, go ahead and subscribe. It will give me more opportunity to continue bringing this type of content as well as many other types. Also, if there's somebody you think we left out of the top 10, somebody you think deserves to be in there, you think Jonathan Taylor should 100% have been in there and been number 6 or whatever, let us know in the comments. These are our opinions, and as we said, a lot of these orders could flip-flop. Our number 10s were different, and we both had guys that we almost could have put at number 10. There's a lot of ways to go. My advice when you're doing fantasy, get somebody in the first round that can average near 20 and build your team around that. But
And
thank you
don't
all.
take a quarterback.
I made the mistake of taking a quarterback in the first round last year, which I will not do again because you can get some really good ones in later rounds, and that is now my strategy. But thank you all so much. Let us know in the comments what you think, if you agree or disagree. For Talmadge Roger Varnado III, I am Jared Johnson, the Jared J, wearing some Dr. Pepper, drinking some Dr. Pepper. Hope y'all have a great week, and I hope I see you again real soon. Now, Derek.